afternoon. What's the problem that the CP rail stoppage is creating right now in Canada?
Look, supply chains are incredibly important at all times, but particularly during this time. Both CP and the union understand how critical the time we're going through and how difficult it would be for further exacerbating our supply chain. So there's a federal mediator on the ground. We're encouraging both sides to reach an agreement very quickly.
And if it's not quick enough, are you ready to go with a special bill to back to work?
We know that the best way out of this is through a negotiated settlement.
Do you rule out back to work legislation?
We know that it is the most sustainable, best way for both parties to agree on an outcome. So we're encouraging them to do so.
So you're not ruling it out. You're not ruling a back to work legislation.
Minister Bibeau. Yeah, what can you tell us about what work your office is doing with Minister O'Regan or Transport to ensure we're not seeing grain shipments being negatively impacted by the CP rail dispute?
I can assure you that I make sure that Minister O'Regan is very well informed of the impact it could have on the agriculture sector. He's in Calgary following up the situation. Federal mediator are there, and as far as I know, they are still negotiating, so we are really hopeful that they will find a resolution.
Yeah, and what are you hearing from your stakeholder groups, especially right now we're getting into seeding, so much of the fertilizer is being shipped by rail. Just like, what's the worry coming from stakeholder groups that you're hearing?
The fertilizer is a good example. Animal feed is another worry, obviously.
There we go.
Farmers are obviously very worried for animal feed, considering the bad harvest we had last year with the drought. Access to fertilizer is another important issue. And we also want to move our commodities to other markets, considering that Canada has a role to feed the world, and especially when some countries are facing food shortages. Thank you.
They're negotiating. Should they keep negotiating? Should they be legislating?
Yeah, they should be negotiating in good faith. They should be at the table, and they are. And that's good. And I hope they come to a resolution soon. Stakes are high for the country.
Yeah. Do you think if it goes on a couple more days, do you think legislation should be prepped to bring them back if necessary?
You always have to be ready, but that's not the primary choice. It's not the best resolution. We believe in collective bargaining, and that's where we should be at.
If we see this drag on for too long and start seeing supply issues and costs go up even further, what action would the government be potentially prepared to do, especially since?
Well, the government has to look at all options that are available to it. We know what the preferred option is. It's to be sitting around the table negotiating, and that's what they're doing, and that's good, with the help of mediation, which is important. Okay, thank you all.
Oui, la grève au CP, là, ça cause des problèmes d'approvisionnement, notamment au Québec. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez que le gouvernement pourrait faire ou peut faire à ce moment-ci?
On croit vraiment au processus de négociation. Évidemment, on suit ça d'extrêmement près, puis on veut que ça se règle parce que les meilleures ententes se règlent autour d'une table.
Une loi spéciale?
Any thoughts on the CP rail labor dispute? Should we be seeing any kind of intervention, be it back to work legislation or otherwise?
You know what? Minister O'Regan has it under control. I think it's important that we get a negotiated settlement.
Yeah, of course.
Any thoughts on the CP rail dispute, and should there be back to work legislation?
Yeah, look, we're looking forward to seeing what the Liberals present in the House. This is a long time coming. We've heard from the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, and this could have devastating impacts on a crisis that we are already in. Every single day counts, so we look forward to seeing what the plan is, and if there is no plan, I hope we discuss it in the House tonight.
What are the things that you're hearing right now from farmers, from other businesses?
Look, there's a problem getting feed for livestock, fertilizer at a time where farming season is about to begin for the spring. Certainly, manufacturing backlogs that were already there, and just the goods and services that Canadians expect at their doorstep. That all comes by rail, or most of it does.
At what point do we have to go to a back-to-work legislation? L'arrêt de travail.
Oui.
La position du Parti conservateur, c'est quoi? Est-ce que ça prend une loi spéciale?
En fait, ce que l'on dit, c'est de trouver une solution pour faire en sorte de ne pas bloquer l'approvisionnement, puis de faire en sorte que les citoyens canadiens et canadiennes puissent continuer à vivre et disons qu'ils ont assez donné.
Mais ça veut dire quoi, ça, ne pas bloquer l'approvisionnement? Ça veut dire
trouver
forcer le retour au travail?
Trouver des solutions. On vient de commencer un conflit, là. Alors, il faut forcer les deux parties à s'asseoir, à trouver des solutions. Maintenant, si jamais ça avance pas, je pense que le gouvernement va devoir imposer des choses. Maintenant, on verra, là. Écoutez, aujourd'hui, c'est trop tôt, là.
Donc,
on n'est pas une loi spéciale.
Une semaine, 2 semaines?
Je peux pas vous dire. Ça dépend de l'évolution du dossier. S'il y a des pourparlers puis la communication se continue, à ce moment-là, on peut continuer à jaser et essayer de trouver des solutions. Si c'est fermé, bloqué, là, c'est une autre situation. Faut analyser la situation.
Fait que si ça se prolonge, vous excluez pas une loi spéciale?
On n'est pas là à ce moment-ci. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Should CP Rail be legislated back? Should they keep negotiating? What do you think?
Well, let's get this negotiations done right now so we can get the economy back on track.
Should rail be an essential service? Oh, should rail be an essential service?
It is. Should be.
Should they be legislated back? Should they keep negotiating?
Well, I will leave that up to the minister to make that determination, but we would certainly encourage them to consider doing something.
You have a CP line, don't you, in Windsor?
Yes, we do.
So what do you think, as a vested party in all this, should they keep negotiating if things bog down? We already saw your bridge blocked, so...
You got to keep negotiating, especially for a long-term solution. Parties just have to be encouraged to stay at the table and to work on that. Too many times there's been shortcuts where we've mandated workers back to work, and that's why we have the same old problems. So it's significant, but at the same time we have to support the collective agreement process.
If it goes past the weekend, your bridge was blocked, a lot of your auto plants were put in jeopardy.
That was illegal, and actually the transport trucks actually produce more of the stuff for just-in-time delivery that ever goes on rail. So they're different types of commodities. Very serious though as well, and just encourage the parties to get there because we need long-term solutions here. And just undermining it by a few hours is not the way to go. Long-term solutions with a collective agreement is going to make it stronger and more profitable and more efficient for us in the future. Every time we do a shortcut by intervening, it doesn't work out, and that's why we're back to where we're at. Thank you.
Yeah, no, they've got to stay at the table and get a deal. I think that's the important thing. The union's issues that they've brought to the company are important ones, and we have a collective bargaining process for a reason. We want to see them work out a deal, and obviously time is of the essence, but we're encouraging both parties to stay at the table.
Now, if things drag on for a couple more days, Port of Vancouver, things have got to keep moving, so...
For sure, I think that puts a lot of pressure on the negotiations, absolutely. But, we need the negotiating process to be respected. Mediation is an important tool in the mix as well, but, it's important that these issues are heard.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
I have a few questions about procurement.
Yes.
All the masks that we're buying in Canada, all the gloves, a lot of them are still coming from outside the country.
Yeah.
And even though the Canada... in the beginning of the pandemic said we're going to be self-sufficient.
Yes.
We're not self-sufficient. What happened?
So if you look at the contracts that we have with like 3M and Medicom, we have contracts for millions of masks. Those are being manufactured right here in Canada. So all along, of course, with procurement, we want to support Canadian businesses. It was the businesses that actually pivoted, retooled, and stepped up that we are so grateful for. So we're going to continue to do what we can to support small businesses, medium-sized businesses, SMEs, because we know that they're the backbone of our country, and we want to continue to support them.
Out of $8 billion that was spent on PPEs,
yes.
Only $2.5 billion went to Canadian companies, which means only 30%. So 70% is still coming from outside the country. How do you reconcile that?
Okay, so let me just correct you on the numbers. $42 of every 42% of the money that we spent with respect to procurement of PPE was Canadian companies that we had spent that money on.
Including protected amount contracts, right?
Those are the contracts that we've had in order to procure the PPE.
Enough.
What I would say is this. You have to remember that at the beginning of this, we had to procure supplies, equipment, and PPE that we needed immediately. So those resources weren't there immediately. So we weren't going to jeopardize the health and safety of Canadians. We wanted to make sure that provinces and territories could rely on us, and we would provide them with the PPE and the medical supplies, etc., that they needed, and we did. I mean, successfully, we did do that. In terms of moving forward, of course, we want to support production, local production, but that's why it's so good to see companies like 3M and Medicom making those products.
We've spoken to a lot of companies that were given grants by the government to retrofit their companies to be able to make those masks. And now they're not getting any procurement from the government, and some of them had to go into receivership. So how do you explain that on one hand the government is giving monies to companies to retrofit to make masks, and on the second hand, on the other, you guys are not giving them contracts?
Well, I'm not sure of the allegation that you're making there. What I
no,
would
it's
say
true.
is
I mean, I've got at least 3 companies in southwestern Ontario that went bankrupt, and they got money from the government to retrofit their plants.
So what I would say in response to that is we wanted to ensure that the health and safety of Canadians came first. We had to make sure that we procured all the PPE that we needed in order to keep Canadians safe. And that's exactly what we did. So there were those investments where you're making to companies in order for them to scale up to provide those pieces of equipment, because we never wanted to run short. And so we wanted to ensure that that support was there. And what I would say ultimately is, as we move forward, of course we want to support Canadian companies. We want that manufacturing and production.
We're not as self-reliant as we were promising to be at the beginning.
Well, we're always working
towards that. Still 60% is coming from outside the country.
So previously, now that companies have come on board, I'm hoping that number goes up. And I can tell you, as Minister of Procurement, I'm going to do everything in my power to upscale the production here so that we can enter into businesses, contracts with those businesses. And we are doing a lot of things in terms of procurement in order to bring the barriers down for small and medium-sized businesses to get access to those procurement
contracts. One last question, if I may. There was a tariff of 18% on PPEs to import them in Canada at the beginning of the pandemic. You got rid of that so you could buy them cheaper from outside. Right now, this has not been reinstated. Companies here making PPEs are saying they have to compete when this tariff should have been there is not there anymore. Are you going to put that tariff of 18%?
I have to look into that, and I will get back to you on that question.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you. Merci.
Any thoughts on the mask mandate sticking around here with the mask mandate ending for the rest of Ontario?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd actually like to see them come in line with the Ontario mask mandate. I mean, those that are vulnerable want to continue to wear their masks. That's important. But for everybody else, I think we should follow along and open up.
All right. And yes, of course, the Ontario economy made the decision about a week before Ontario made their announcement. Do you think any appetite in your party to maybe push Mr. Broussard to be bring the board back together? It was hey, maybe take another look at these instead of keeping the mask mandate.
I think that's a great idea, because we want to be consistent. At the beginning, when we implemented mask mandates here on the Hill, it was in accordance with what Ontario was doing. So for consistency, I think we